Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Outside Looking In, the podcast series wherein I talk to 29 people. And in doing so, we kind of cross the NBA landscape. And there's a pit stop in each conversation to talk about the Raptors. So you, the listener, get a consensus on the team you cheer for. But additionally, of course, you learn about the league at large. That's what Outside Looking In is. And today, a very special episode with Sabreena Merchant. And it's the Clippers. So, yes, Kawhi Leonard. He left the Raptors for this team. And Sabreena, so kind to join us. You might know her from SBA Nation, where she writes about the NBA and the WNBA. You might also know her from the Step Through podcast with Evan Gualberto. And if you don't know, Bouncing Around was a podcast I hosted with Evan Gualberto. So if you want to go to Evan Gualberto's YouTube channel, you can find a lot of Sam and a lot of Sabreena. But Sabreena, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, we could just talk about Evan for 50 minutes if you want. Like, I think that'd be a great show as well.
Yeah, I know he listens to these, and I'm almost certain he'll listen to this one, considering who the two people talking are. So,
Mm.
Evan, thanks for tuning in. You're the best. Much love. But I guess we'll flip it over to the Raptors then, so Evan can get his regular dose of basketball talk in. The Raptors, a very interesting team. After talking to, I think this is episode 16 or 17, everybody seems interested. Not everybody thinks that they're incredible, but everybody finds them interesting. I'm curious what you find of them.
I mean, I wish Sergio Scariolo was still on their staff, honestly. Just after watching all of the Eurobasket and all of Juancho Hernan Gomez there, I think that'd be just a lovely addition to Toronto. But hey, still a fun coaching staff there. Um, I'm kind of just fascinated by all of the flyers that they've taken this offseason. Like, everyone's favorite people on NBA Twitter seem to be finding their way to Toronto. Like, Otto Porter is there. Is he still good? I'm not quite sure, even after watching the NBA Finals. Like DJ Wilson, um, Josh Jackson, who just seems to still be on an NBA team. I'm not quite sure how that's happened after all of his NBA career. I'm not even sure Christian Koloko qualifies as a flyer, but I just thoroughly enjoyed watching him during the NCAA tournament, and I'm fascinated to see how he fits into what Toronto's trying to do here. But yeah, I mean, as someone who covers the Clippers, like, the parallels to the Raptors and trying to achieve the ideal of the 2019 Raptors is always very front of mind for every Clippers fan, and it just becomes increasingly obvious. Like, after they brought in Serge Ibaka, after they brought in Norman Powell, I mean, like, Nick Nurse even joked when he came to LA in March, like, who do you guys plan on stealing next? And I'm not quite sure, but I guess for the Raptors fans here, I'm going to say nobody for the time being, because the Clippers roster is pretty stacked as is. But yeah, I just the theory of what the Raptors trying to do is always very interesting to me, because they're super weird during the regular season and they just play harder than everybody else. And I think that works for the first 82 games, but I almost wonder if, like, they're setting an artificially high, like, impression of themselves during the regular season that they can't quite cash in during the postseason, because they don't have that apex predator guy who's going to take over games. I don't know if Scotty Barnes is going to be that guy, but that's, like, the most interesting thing to me about the current and future iterations of the Raptors, is if Scotty can turn into that player. At the moment, I'm more interested to see if Pascal Siakam, like, becomes that version of that guy again. I mean, I think he was okay during this year's postseason, but, like, the playoffs haven't necessarily been as good for him as the regular season since 2019, when obviously he was surrounded by the one Kawhi Leonard. So that to me is, like, the most fascinating thing about the Raptors, is if Pascal Siakam can, like, regain that all-star, all-NBA type level, because I just think that's the cleanest path towards them being an interesting team in the playoffs.
Yeah, with Pascal, I was pretty happy with his playoff performances, but it was tough to glean the top tier performance stuff away from it, because the Raptors, they got to the playoffs and Fred
Mhm.
was injured, and then Scotty got injured, and then Gary got injured, and they obviously, the 76ers won that series fair and square, but the Raptors were, man, they were trying to hobble through it. So the gleaning stuff from it became difficult. But I think I had a positive takeaway from Pascal's playoffs. And as you say, Scotty, is he the guy? Pascal is the simplest way forward. I think that this team probably, Pascal can improve.
Mhm.
Everybody in the league can improve to some degree. It just becomes less and less, I guess, probable as certain people go on. But Scotty, if he's like an all-star on a rookie contract, then I think it does kind of reshape the Raptors' ceiling with this team, because then they'll have everybody on contract and they don't have to worry about getting it elsewhere. That's really interesting. You brought up having so many guys that are well liked, and you brought up Josh Jackson. Kind of funny. This was a big shout out to Blake Murphy for figuring this out. Every time the signing news comes out and everyone knows somebody signed, Blake is also, he's always getting the I guess the contract details. Josh Jackson not on an Exhibit 10, but the
Hmm.
lesser known Exhibit 9. The difference between the two is that if you get injured on an Exhibit 9, the team does not have to keep you on the roster until you're healthy. They can waive you without penalty. So Josh Jackson just not guaranteed anything coming to
Nothing.
Raptors
Yeah.
camp. Very interesting. And so here's the thing about you saying these teams trying to pursue the wing thing. So in preparation for this, I was wondering, I considered the Clippers to be the wings team in the NBA. And many people did, because of they don't just have wings deep on their roster like Amir Coffey, who's fantastic, or Luke Kennard, right? But they have Kawhi and Paul George. So I looked up the Raptors between 6'6" and 6'10". The Clippers, their training camp roster, they have 7 players. That's a
That's it.
fair amount. Yeah, it's a fair amount. And I was expecting more, but I thought 7 is okay. And I counted the Raptors, and they had 15.
Oh
And
god.
I was like, well, damn, that's a lot of wings. And so to move us off the Raptors a little bit and into the wingy, albeit somewhat less wingy Clippers, is this finally their year? They've been flexing the most talented roster opening day repeatedly, and maybe they finally have a chance to do something about it.
Now I'm wondering how many of the Clippers are 6'5", because I feel like that would enter a lot more into the conversation. Luke's got to be about 6'4", 6'5", maybe Brennan Boston too. But
I think
there's
6'5" for both of
there's
them, yeah.
another, yeah. There's another layer there that I think 7 just seems so low. I mean, I was listing all the players who I think are going to be in the Clippers playoff rotation, and it's a much higher number than 7, which is a fun conversation to have down the line. But yeah, okay. Most talented roster. I think everyone can agree that last year was very much just a placeholder year. They never expected Kawhi Leonard to come back. They didn't want to force him to come back, and they didn't exactly go about the offseason. I should say the 2021 offseason, like with the intention of like, hey, Kawhi, look at all this fun we're having. Maybe you should accelerate the rehab process. It was very much, we're just going to clear the books a little bit, try out some younger guys. They took a flyer on Justice Winslow. That didn't really work out. They brought in Eric Bledsoe. I shouldn't say it didn't work out. They turned into Robert Covington and Norman Powell, so I think
Yeah.
it worked out just fine for them. But it was a placeholder year, right? And now, goodness gracious, this roster is like, it's just a lot to look at. I mean, I'm trying to think of who's going to make the regular season rotation, and I'm curious how many minutes, Luke Kennard and Amir Coffey are going to get. And those guys were pivotal to what they did last year. And I mean, Luke Kennard is a big reason why they win Game 7 against Dallas in 2021. So it's not like these are untested players. There's no room on the team for them to get minutes. And that depth is, I can only imagine, just going to pay amazing dividends for the Clippers down the line, because I think about the play-in games that they had last year and how tired they looked by the end of it. The fact that Reggie Jackson was legitimately the only ball handler they had on the team, like point guard wise, because PG just has to do so many other things, like scoring wise. You can't have him creating and scoring, all that good stuff. And then, Paul George is out for the game against the Pelicans, and it's just a 6-man rotation that Ty Lue is running of players that he trusts. And that is never going to happen for the Clippers in the 2022 season, because again, just look at the roster. I just want to like put it up next to me so you can see like all of the 14 names that I expect to be playing regular minutes. But I think like they got tired against Minnesota. They got tired against Dallas. Truthfully, they got tired against like Phoenix in that conference finals in 2021. So just to be able to like load manage, for lack of a better word, during the regular season is going to be such a huge part of what makes the Clippers successful down the line. But I do believe like this is the best team on paper in the NBA. I don't think it's a particularly like radical opinion. I go back and forth between who I would favor between the Clippers and the Golden State Warriors in a potential playoff series, and I truly hope we get that. But just, yeah, I mean, like look at the team. Like you've got Ty Lue, who is proven battle tested in all of these playoff situations. You've got Kawhi Leonard again, proven battle tested in all of these playoff situations. Paul George had a fantastic playoffs in 2021. He's fairly well rested, honestly. Only played 31 games last year because of that UCL injury. And then like John Wall, Reggie Jackson, Terrence Mann, Nicholas Batum, who's again well rested because he didn't play for France during Eurobasket, which I think probably cost them a gold medal. But hey, it's going to be pretty good for the Clippers this year. Just an abundance of riches. I feel like I'm just repeating myself over and over again, but like I can't possibly explain how ridiculously loaded they are, especially because as part of my job, I also cover the Lakers, and wow, is it the opposite over there?
So that kind of brings in an interesting. Let's do the superstar talk. So Paul George, I'm the largest proponent of Paul George around. I'm on the payroll. Like
Lovely.
I'm a Paul George positivity poster. Okay, some alliteration for the people listening at home. But Kawhi Leonard, they put out an undoctored, apparently, photo of his thighs on Twitter. And it's when that Alex Caruso picture came out, I think last year, and then he got tested for, performance enhancing drugs right away. And then he was like, by the way, this photo was edited. Kawhi's is real.
Yeah.
Okay. He's been putting in work to make sure that not only does he not tear anything in his knees again, anything like that. He's just making sure that he will never injure his leg again. I've never seen a more muscular man down low. I'm curious what you think this upcoming season has for him. And considering that he's carrying about 40 extra pounds on each thigh, is he going to be able to like dunk?
Yeah, the explosive box jumps that he did during his ACL rehab really appear to have taken to the next level. But yeah, I mean, like Kawhi Leonard has literally nothing to prove, right? He's been
Yeah.
Finals MVP, 2 separate franchises. He had one of the greatest playoff series I've ever seen against Dallas in 2021, back in that first round, which I try not to assign that much importance to first round series because 16 teams are in the first round, but like I think about those Dallas Clippers games all the time. Like that was just a ridiculous set of 7 games. So again, like really nothing to prove, but just the adding to the legacy of like taking the Clippers to the promised land, I think just puts him like in an unassailable top 15 sort of conversation, which I realize is not what we're having right now, but I mean, it's something that I'm sure he's thinking about. Like that's why he's loading up literally for this upcoming season. Uh, the Clippers are just phenomenally good when Kawhi Leonard's on the court. Like there's no like ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like whatever questions you have about like the aesthetics of Kawhi's game or like what he does on the court and like what he's better at and whatnot, he just makes every single team that much better. Like I know there was this win percentage stat that was floating around earlier during the offseason about like how Kawhi's teams are just fantastically good when he's on the court. And like that has absolutely been the case for the Clippers. I mean, you can put the ball in his hands and just let him go to work. You can just make him that fulcrum of that drive, kick, spray offense that Ty Lue absolutely adores. I mean, defensively, there is not really a matchup that I think doesn't work for him. Like he shut down Luka Doncic in Game 7. Like most people outside of the country of Poland are not shutting down Luka Doncic. Like it's not a thing that's happening. So I'm just really excited to watch him play again because it's been such a long time. I mean, he tore his ACL in June of 2021, and like again, there was never really consideration that we were going to see him before now. 16 months later. So I think he's just like itching to go, honestly, because this team is just prepared to win a championship. And like I mentioned that apex predator thing earlier with Pascal and Scotty, like this is the guy, right? Like this is the one you circle on your scouting report. Like everything that an opposing team does is geared towards stopping him. And it's really, really difficult. Dallas couldn't do it. Utah couldn't do it. Damn well, Phoenix was not going to be able to do it if he had been healthy in that series. There just aren't many people who I think are physically capable of meeting up with Kawhi, like just, on the court. And the way that he just handles himself, like it's so methodical. There aren't any wasted movements. I mean, I expect him to just, yam on a couple people a few times with those newly enhanced thigh muscles. But
That's I'm glad you brought up the physical aspect of Kawhi Leonard because Andrew Wiggins, to his credit, became kind of the in vogue stopper in last year's playoffs. And you think about the state of the league that Andrew Wiggins became the stopper.
Dude,
And
you're
then
Canadian.
well, no. But no, I'm saying that this is the level that Kawhi Leonard is at, because Andrew's very, very good. Andrew would not have a good time with Kawhi, and Kawhi would probably have an exceptional time with Andrew. And there's a history of those two playing against each other, and there's some man to boy stuff that has happened as far as that goes. And so I'm very excited to see Kawhi in the playoffs and playing against a league that is probably comfortable not having to guard him, especially guys who exist in that like 6'5" to 6'9" range.
Mhm.
It's not fun to guard Kawhi Leonard. He
I
quite
can't
literally
imagine.
he breaks bones when you guard him sometimes, which
And
is
then
kind of
he's
absurd.
just so, like, awkward too that, like, I imagine just, like, standing next to him at the free throw line, like, you're not even sure if he's trying to get into your head or if that's just
Yeah.
who Kawhi is. It's gotta
Uh,
be just a full trip trying to defend this guy.
yeah. There's some people you can talk trash to in the hopes of disillusioning them. That won't happen with Kawhi. You're
Yeah.
not getting in there. But so with the rest of the lineup, there's guys like Terrence Mann, Amir Coffey, yeah, Batum, as you talked about, like there's a bunch of long, smart defenders and gritty defenders on this Clippers team. That was kind of their calling card last year, as you said, a placeholder year. I'm curious now that they have the stars back in fold, and we've heard drama coming out of that locker room before about the stars not being held as accountable as other players on the roster and stuff. Do you think that this is a year that everything can coalesce? They can have the superstar level, hey, we have these guys, and they can also be this gritty underdog Tyronn Lue team that really gives it all on defense.
Yeah, what's interesting about Ty is that before he got to the Clippers, I really thought of him more as an offense guy, like he was gonna do everything possible to put beautifully spaced lineups on the court and just, like, play an aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball. And then the more I talked to him about, like, coaching the Clippers, it's very clear that during the regular season at least, like, you do not play unless you defend. Like, that's
Hmm.
just how it works. And he has the roster to say, like, "Oh, Luke, like, if things are not going well for you today, like, those are Norm's minutes or those are Terrence Mann's minutes." Terrence Mann, another guy who I think is 6'5", but I'm gonna stop coming back to that. So I just think by virtue of the fact that, like, minutes are not gonna be easy to come by, there's going to have to be a culture of defensive accountability just because how else are you gonna set yourself apart in terms of getting onto the court? Like, I just don't see, like, why you'd have to play a guy who isn't giving it his all on the defensive end of this ball because, like, you just have so many more options. And I think that's a big part of the reason why, like, Ty hasn't had the superstar issues that Doc Rivers had on the Clippers. Like, there has been literally nothing but positive vibes emanating from the Clippers locker room ever since Ty Lue got there. It's, like, almost a little sickening, honestly. Like, they're just so overwhelmingly happy. Like, the pictures from Paul George's wedding over the off season, and like, he and Zoo are best buds somehow, and like it's all very lovey dovey, and they have such a great time with one another. I mean, like, I had to block the Clippers on Twitter because of all the workout videos that were happening. It was just like, I don't need all of this aggressively positive content coming my way. But yeah, all that to say is, like, I just don't see locker room issues really coming, especially because, like, this is a team that has been together mostly. Like, and the caveat to that is, like, what John Wall brings to it. Because if I were to identify, like, clear weaknesses from the Clippers over the last 2 years, it's that the offense can get a little stagnant, right? Like, you put the ball in Kawhi Leonard's hands, and yeah, he can play make, but he's not a natural point guard, right? He's not delivering the ball to everybody. He's not making sure everybody gets their touches. He's just doing what's right in that specific moment. And, like, that's great to, like, win games, but it also means that, like, not everyone is feeling completely involved, and their flow can be a little lacking at times. And there have been numerous lulls, even when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George play, where just, like, the scoring isn't happening and they don't apply a ton of paint pressure. And Reggie Jackson, God bless him, like, did his very best to be the point guard for the team last year, especially once they traded Eric Bledsoe when there was literally nobody else who could bring the ball up the court. But, like, that was just a lot to ask of him, and his efficiency, like, cratered, and it's just a very big role to put him into. John Wall theoretically fits all that boxes. Like, if you're giving me 2017, 2018 John Wall, it's like, oh, this is the perfect player to put into the system because he's going to get downhill. He's going to distribute to everybody. He's going to add a little pace to this team, which just does not run, not at all. Like, I don't know why they do not run. So I like the theory of that fit quite a bit, but what is this version of John Wall, right? Like, I've watched the workout videos, but I've also watched workout videos of like Russell Westbrook shooting threes in an open gym. Like, what does that mean to me? So I don't know how healthy he is. I don't know if he's capable of being that version of John Wall. And like, in terms of that accountability, like, you can't just hand him the starting point guard spot, but at the same time, he theoretically is the guy who fills all of your weaknesses. So that's the one little, I guess, potential spark that I'm looking at, because theoretically, like, John Wall should fit in with all them. Like, he's repped by the same agent as most of the big guys. Like, this is a very heavy CAA team. Like, we don't talk about it as much as the Knicks, but this is a very heavy CAA team. And he should be like super copacetic with PG and Kawhi. And like, I don't anticipate there being any problems, but like, if he's not the guy that he thinks he is, then that's a potential locker room issue I could see coming up.
That's when I think about John Wall on that team, if he's, as you say, if he's the guy that we all hope and think that he might be, some years off, a lot of time to rehab, to get his body right, to start playing, I guess, a more modern version of his style. His playmaking is so far ahead of anybody else on the roster, mixed with his athleticism. Like, Nicholas Batum is a really, really fun playmaker in spurts, but he's also not going to get to the same spots on the floor that Wall does. And if Wall is the guy who can like hit some catch and shoot stuff, make quicker processing reads, like against closeouts and when Paul George or Kawhi Leonard tilt the defense, man, that Clippers team could start to look like they have zero weaknesses, especially since they lost Hartenstein, of course, but Zoo is still really great. They can go big. They can play quite a few different types defensively. And as you mentioned, like, if they have guys who are out of the guys they might leave out of the rotation are going to be really good. Like, Norman Powell is going to be in the rotation, obviously. I'm excited to see if he'll have a good defensive year for the first time in some time. But Amir Coffey, who I wanted on the Raptors, Dagum, he might not even play that much because of guys like
I
Robert
just don't see where the
Covington.
minutes are going to come from for Amir. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if, the Clippers, we made that joke about them stealing Raptors. I think that the Raptors should be able to take a couple wings from the Clippers at some point this year. We'll
I'm sure
see.
that's an even trade, right? Kawhi for Amir Coffey. Like, that's a pretty solid 1-for-1.
Yeah, most people will be happy with it at this point. You make your bones with how it's shaking out. But back to the Raptors aspect of it. Once again, wingy teams, but the Raptors, Koloko represents the same spot on the Raptors that Ivica Zubac represents on the Clippers. There's a difference in, I guess, quality there. And not that I'm trying to be low on Koloko. It's just Zoo is a guy who's played playoff minutes. He's played a lot of minutes at the NBA level, and he's won a lot of minutes at the NBA level. He's a good center. And the Raptors, if you're the Clippers, is there anything you see happening over there that you say, I want that? Give me that. Maybe not necessarily a player, but a play style, an ethic that's embodied north of the border.
That's a good question. I hadn't even considered Koloko and Zoo as similar archetypes. Koloko just seems so much more like vertically gifted than
They're
Ivica
they're
Zubac.
both tall. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the archetype is, I shouldn't
Okay.
use that term. It's they're both large people,
Yeah.
and I guess that's where it ends. Yes.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder what the Clippers are going to do with backup center. Like, they basically always had a big on the court during the regular season, and part of that was because a lot of their wings were hurt, and you can't play small when you don't have wings. But just for 82 games, like, that's a lot to ask of Zoo, and I don't really see Marcus Morris and Robert Covington as like backup centers. I guess they signed Moses Brown, but I don't know. I don't think you're going to strike the Hartenstein well like twice in a row, but that's not what you asked me. You asked me about the Raptors. Is there anything that they should take? I do think that Nick Nurse is more creative defensively than Ty Lue is, especially during the regular season. Like, they just try more stuff out. Um, the Clippers are kind of like pretty consistent with their just like base drop. Like, they don't do a lot different. Like, if there's a a pick and pop big, then like maybe they'll just put Nico on that guy and have Zoo stay in the paint. Like they did that a lot against the Wolves, right? They'd put Nico on Karl Anthony Towns and then like have Zoo guard Vando, but basically like just zone in the middle of the paint. Um, which I realize that no longer exists with the Wolves, but I'm sure like a similar archetype exists in the NBA still. Uh, yeah, I just think that like we're probably going to see more of this year with the Clippers because they have more options at their disposal. But I just like the idea of trying more things out during the regular season, whereas I feel like Ty was more insistent on like just building a very consistent base, and then like we'll put out all the wrinkles in the playoffs. And like he's very good at that. I was like, I'm not going to discount what Ty Lue does during the postseason, but I don't know. I think it'd be fun to see more experimentation during the first 82.
So we're kind of sitting on opposite ends of the spectrum here, because you brought up that the Clippers ran a lot of drop and that they had like a very strong drop base package defense. And I want the Raptors to run more drop. And they're very creative. The Raptors, they do all the in vogue defensive stuff. They next, they peel, they X out, they're running like tons of switch up top, and they love to do it. And they pull off the strong side corner, which is, there's like
Maddening.
there's 3 or 4 teams in the NBA that do it, and none of them do it as often as the Raptors. And it's a defense that is like, we're going to be in rotation even from a standstill. We'll go into rotation, who cares? I would like to see them try out more drop. I've had this conversation with a few people at this point in time, but so listener, if you're hearing me harp on the same thing, my apologies, but I would like to see more drop. And there's very small sample stuff. Like Pascal Siakam was the 97th percentile in drop last year for points per possession. I'm not expecting that to be repeated whatsoever. But Precious Achiuwa was a good drop defender last year, and I would like to see the Raptors give him more of an opportunity to try and anchor the back end by his lonesome rather than pulling guys out of everywhere. Just add a little bit of diversity to the defense in that way. That's kind of my thing. So when I say that, a little more drop for the Raptors, in your mind, does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like well, so what's the idea behind more drop? Is it because like you think it's harder for the Raptors to execute what they're doing, or because they just need something to rely on more consistently, or what's
I want it to be the knuckleball, because the
okay?
Raptors, they're running a very helter-skelter defense. There's a lot going on. Some teams come into these games very well prepared to put a guy in the strong side and weak side corner, and they're like, hey, you shoot like 4 threes a game, shoot 10. And it's an NBA player shooting open threes. Sometimes they drop. It would be nice to be able to go to drop more often in the middle of games if those guys are kind of popping off to break rhythm. You can go back to it, your base
Sure.
defense, of course, but a lot of the times they respond to superstars as far as like maybe they go box and one. Maybe it's triangle and two, and they can do these hybrid possessions where they go from zone to man and back. But there's a lot of times where they get caught in that tidal wave of allowing threes out of the corner. Like they had the highest frequency of corner threes in the NBA by some measure. I think the drop, I'd like to see if it's tenable. And maybe it isn't, and maybe egg on my face, but that's kind of my point of view regarding that.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, it's nice to have something that consistently works and that kind of like scheme wise applies to like the other 29 teams. I can see that. I do think it's quite funny that we're on opposite sides here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's everybody, grass is greener to some
Grass is
degree, of
greener.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, there's different strengths among these teams. And so the Raptors are playing to their perceived strengths. The Clippers are playing to theirs. The Raptors also, I want to ask you, because he's gotten under discussed in most of these episodes. If you're looking for a point guard, not that you can have him for the Clippers or anything like that, but Fred VanVleet, pretty damn good. I'm just kind of wondering what your thoughts are on Fred.
I think he has a great clothing line, first of all. Number one thing about Fred VanVleet, his children are adorable. The picture of him meeting with the kids for the first time in the NBA bubble, like that video just warms my heart. But as a basketball player, sure. I think it's great that he is sub 6 foot tall and has carved out an appropriate career as an NBA player. I don't know what he's actually listed at, but he's definitely sub 6 foot tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, not in that 6'6" to 6'10" sweet spot that we're searching for.
Right.
Uh, I almost wonder if like his style of play just like naturally tires himself out. Like he just works so freaking hard that like by the end of the game, like, you just want like a little bit more Freddie, and it's just not there because he's just been diving all over the floor, and the way he plays brings so much energy. Which like obviously like if you're an undrafted guy, that's kind of the way you have to make your mark in the league. But maybe he can dial it back a little. Like he's got the contract, he's an all-star. Freddie All-Star, right? Like that was the thing that the Toronto broadcast kept saying last year. Yeah, I always wonder like how players evolve into like that next iteration of themselves. Like, does he still think of himself as, oh, I am an undrafted guy from Wichita State, I have to keep playing a certain way to assert myself in this league? Or no, I am an all-star, an NBA champion, I got a finals MVP vote from Hubie Brown, like I can maybe like change it up a little. So I mean that just like narrative wise kind of interests me about the idea that is Fred VanVleet. But also just like, can anyone else on the Raptors take threes, or is it just up to Freddie and Gary?
Right. So there's actually the interesting aspect of that is Precious post All-Star break, when Fred, his body fell apart. There's just way too big a toll during last season. Another benefit of drop is you let Freddie do lock and trail with his short little legs instead of tracking all over the court. But Freddie's injured. He plays like 11 or 12 games post All-Star break, shoots 29% from three. Gary shot like 35% from three, and the Raptors started seeing a lot of zone as a result. Precious Achiuwa threw on the Superman cape and started hitting, he's taking 4 threes a game and started hitting 40%. Pascal Siakam, mostly shooting above the break, not hitting that many, and not in the corner that often, but hitting his corner threes at a high percentage. And OG broke his finger, didn't realize he broke his finger, and then was like, hey, I have to fix this. I can't shoot. And then the Raptors were like, yeah, we just need Fred and Gary to shoot threes. And then all of a sudden, when that went south, they just asked Pascal to make 14, 18 footers a game. And then they're like, maybe this will work. Maybe this is how we win games. And then that happened in the playoffs. And that was really gnarly. Otto Porter Jr., as you said, a famed member of the NBA Twitter fan base. People love him. He shoots threes really well, so they have 3 options now.
Three options.
Still not that many. Maybe Precious is also part of that this year. So maybe
I mean, Juancho hit a lot of threes in Eurobasket.
He's not guaranteed a spot on the team, but he has a fully guaranteed contract. So he's probably going to make it out of camp. There's a shooter there. Maybe, and also that's another thing too, is like Juancho, if you look at his on-offs over the course of his career, every team has been like, wow, our defense really is terrible with you on the floor. And the Raptors are maybe the first team that's like, we think we got something for you. They're like, everybody here gets beat. You're going to get beat the same way you did in Denver, in Boston, everywhere else. But guess what? You just have to relocate to the next guy. Just make sure you're part of the horde, dude. And that's, maybe there's more potential for a 3-point shooter there in Juancho. He's the most interesting bet on length so far, I think.
I mean, the fact that like his NBA career has been revitalized by the fact that he was in a Netflix film is so funny to me. Like it's absolutely because of the Netflix film.
He's that's very 21st century. Like that. Yeah, that I couldn't imagine.
Honestly, I feel like I see more references to Bo Cruz than I actually do Juancho, and the man just hit like 7 threes in a Eurobasket final game. So we could maybe use his real name.
I'm pretty sure my alert because I didn't watch the final. I was just, I don't know, doing something else. And I remember seeing, I was seeing Bo Cruz in all caps pop up on my timeline. And I was like, okay, so Juancho's doing something. And it turns out Juancho was doing something, not Bo Cruz. And yeah, them's the breaks. I hope he also outgrows the newly earned nickname and just gets back to being Juancho. I'm sure that's what he craves.
It's a great name as is.
And he's like a cool guy, handsome enough to co-star in a movie, got really
Got
cool
some
ink.
interesting tattoos. Yeah.
That's right. He's got a lot going on. But as far as the Raptors and Clips, is there anything else that you think they have going on that for parting shots before we get out of here you want to discuss?
I'm just really happy to see Kawhi and Paul George play together again. I think there has been some sort of like outside narrative of like how do they play together, and it just doesn't make any sense to me because like 2019-20, like we're talking about the Doc Rivers year, plus 13 with the two of them on the court together. 2020-21 plus 18 with the two of them on the court together. Like it just stylistically, it makes so much sense to me. Like you can put the ball in Kawhi's hands and let PG work off the ball, and he's more than happy to do that. And he can also carry the offense when Kawhi sits, or just be the guy who Kawhi drives and kicks to. Defensively, it makes so much sense to me. I mean, Kawhi is the lockdown ISO wonderful defender who can also like help like tremendously because his hands just come out of nowhere. Like the number of times that you think that a pass is going to make its way through, and then Kawhi's fingertip just gets on it, and like those mitts, man, it's something else. You talked about the thighs. I think that her hands are still the most impressive part of the Kawhi Leonard physique. And then you get Paul George, who can like still slither through screens. His technique navigating those just befuddles me consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So I realize this is not a Raptors Clippers thing. This is just a Clippers thing. I just wanted to get it out there that I think this is the best duo in the NBA. And I I'm I don't know that it's going to lead to an NBA championship because again, I don't know how they fare against a Golden State Warriors type because who is guarding Stephen Curry is always a question to me. But yeah, as far as like just the Raptors West similarity thing, like um I almost feel bad that they've taken so much from Toronto without giving anything back. Like at least Serge is no longer on the team. But it's it's just so funny to me that like everybody in Utah made this big stink of Worldwide West and like the Julius Randle showing up at this Utah Dallas playoff game. Uh, I thought they were there to watch Jalen Brunson, honestly, not Donovan Mitchell. But like Lawrence Frank followed Kawhi Leonard around for an entire season. Like he pioneered that.
That's that's definitely a very interesting wrinkle of the Clippers Raptors backstory is that Lawrence Frank was just like, "Hey dude," like almost
I'm here.
like an early 2000s college humor sketch of a guy who follows you everywhere, something like that. In addition to the duo of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, sometimes I seriously wonder, did everybody watch the same Paul George 5 for 17 game and then like pack it up and then
Yeah.
didn't watch those two anymore? I don't understand where the commentary comes from
It's all the
regarding,
bubble. It's really all the bubble. Pandemic P is
hey,
a shockingly good nickname.
don't the Raptors fans know it as far as Siakam's concerned as
Yeah.
well? Two guys who Siakam, one of the most unique movers in the NBA currently, and Paul George, quite literally, I think is basketball succinct. Like that
Mhm.
guy, you watch him play basketball, it is the platonic ideal of how it's supposed to look, and he does it at like 6'10". What a treat.
What a
And I,
trick.
I
And he
think,
plays two guard.
yeah, like you talked about his technique getting around screens.
Mhm.
He's way too slithery. I've
Mhm.
never seen that type of fluidity from a guy that big. He's one of my favorite players to watch, and I can't wait to see him and more of the Clippers this year. But yeah, Sabreena, it's been a pleasure, of course. But at the end of the podcast, I always just tell the people the time now is to plug yourself. If you want the people to be reading you, listening to you, maybe you want to suggest a book, whatever it is, the time is yours to tell the people how to get at you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to meet with that Venn diagram of our shared
Yes,
podcast buddy.
yes.
So I'm happy to be here. I'm actually going to be doing a lot more Lakers stuff this year, just sort of the vagaries of how SB Nation works. So if you're interested in a lesser Los Angeles basketball team, please follow my work at silverscreenworld.com. But I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. And as always, the WNBA is just my favorite thing in the world. And I will be writing at swishappeal.com, another SB Nation subsidiary, because for as much as like the NBA delights me, nothing quite gets to my heart like the Los Angeles Sparks.
Yes, the sparks and the Venn diagram of Samson, Evan, and Sabreena. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Listener, thanks for tuning in, whether you got into this on the podcast channel or YouTube. If it is YouTube, I guess make sure to like the video. That's good. It helps the channel, I hear. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you.